Talk a little bit
Yeah.
about the connection with all of the things that we, discussed so far and the actual body, how that manifests. Because I've
Yeah.
started maybe 6 or 7 months ago getting more and more into bioenergetics and actually working with the body and all these
Yeah.
kind of body therapies.
Yeah.
And it's been so effective. I mean, I've done NLP and all these other coaching practices, but there's something special when you feel the body. Maybe talk a little bit
Stop.
a little bit more
Yeah.
from your perspective as well.
Like that was probably one of the biggest aspects that got me relating into it from my background, is like working with the physical body, like as a physio, and like working with movement. Like I qualified just before like the recession hit Ireland, so I was like I was early 20s when it just qualified. The recession hit, so there was a lot of people who were in a lot of pain from like the mental and emotional heaviness and trauma that was happening in that time, of like people losing their house, under a lot of financial burden. There was a lot, like really high levels of suicide in Ireland at that time. So like when I was like just young, fresh out of college and stuff like that, like people were coming to me with injuries, but by the time they would feel it was okay to invest in themselves to try to get an injury fixed, they were thinking as like their injuries was just a physical injury, where in a matter of fact it was actually so much of it was this pent up tension and heaviness and energies of it. And like I started to see that really early on, like, and I was always very like tapped in and tuned in to being able to read that even when I didn't understand what it was. And then like when we moved over to Perth, like that just went tenfold. Like I started looking more into other therapies and like combining like my knowledge of the physical body with more of the energetic awareness, and being able to like marry the two of them together and just intuitively work with that, because I could see that where people were holding their pain, where people had restrictions within their movement, so much of that linked into where they were holding like different emotional blocks or different blockages with the flow of energy through their body. And like I was just really blessed to have some amazing mentors who were able to guide me into unlocking a lot of that awareness for myself. And yeah, like that just kind of rolled on over the years. But then when I get into more of the when I got into more of the coaching side of things and more of that, like so much of the stuff that I do is like we can learn all of this work through our logic mind, but if we're not processing it through our body, we're missing such a big piece of the puzzle. Because it's like that's what embodiment is at the end of the day. It's like so many of us, like we go through these big massive breakthroughs, these big experiences, but if we're not allowing ourselves to filter that through our nervous system, through our body, like we're still holding on to so much of that pain, so much of that trauma that is. And like as you said, delving deeper into looking at the bioenergetics, but looking at like how like different emotions and different things are all stored in different parts of our body, and like just understanding that awareness of it, it's just, it opens up so many pathways of how much we can start unlocking. And yeah, it's amazing to see.
Yeah, that's a journey in and of itself. Like you could spend, I mean, you've been on this path for nearly 10 years now. You know the benefits, but for people that are listening, Michael also says that, Michael, the guy that I'm working with, he says that normally when a trauma happens or something very intense happens, and usually occurs in parts of the body parts in the brain rather, where there is no language. So to really effectively process something like this, you really need to employ the body and all these kind of therapies rather than just purely speaking, which again, to some extent, maybe it does have some merit, but it's a totally different feeling when you, like you said, you start screaming, you get into this kind of primal mode where you feel the body and channel it through that.
And that's when you look at more of that somatic release and stuff like that, like if you've ever experienced or seen any of them therapy releases, like they're so powerful, being able to work through it in that way. Like, and like I've worked with people and I've like been part of like retreats and different things where like in one experience of doing a somatic release where you're able to release it from every cell of your body through that physical, like that's stuff that people have been trying to like heal in themselves for like years and years of talk therapy. Like, and that's not to that's not to push down talk therapy, because that is such an important role
Of
for
course.
so many people as well. But that's where like it's important to like look at the alternatives and marry different things together and find what works for you. But yeah, like it's being able to like work with the physical body, and it's so powerful. And I find for men especially, it's like so many men are completely detached from their body, where they're just completely caught up in that analytical mind.
Mm.
And like when they're trying to delve into this personal development work and doing the men's work on themselves, they're trying to literally analyze and analytically process the way out of all of these pains and traumas and discomforts and all of that stuff. And it's not going to fly. It's like until you are able to decipher that through your physical body and through your energetic body, that's where you're going to be able to start making the big shifts and changes.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
You did say somatic releases, and this is something that I've been a part of on a few occasions. It's very difficult to kind of describe it with words, and obviously you cannot do it justice by, again, like you said, being logical. If people hear somatic releases, how would you describe it in a very simple terms? Obviously, it's something that there is a lot more value being there and actually experiencing than purely entertaining it logically.
Yeah. Like again, it just goes back to what we were speaking into, how like every emotion, every pain, every trauma, all of them different things are stored in their cellular memory. They're stored in their physical body, in their cellular memory. Even going back as far as like lots of like ancestral trauma, all the stuff that has happened through your ancestral lines, all of them things are stored in their DNA. Like, so even like if it's something that, like, if you believe it or not, is like how like so much of our traumas, our wounds, all of them things, like we can heal everything from this lifetime, but like there's got to be stuff that has come through the conditioning from our past that is just within us. Like you look at different races, you look at different people. For myself, like I work with a lot of Irish people here in Australia, and like a lot of like people that I have worked with always come to me and ask is like, why have so many like Irish men got the similar issues? And I was like, when you look at what happened in their past, how Irish people like were so suppressed for so long, like through the famine, through like all of the troubles, through the civil wars, through all of that stuff, there's so much of that is already ingrained in their systems. So like, yeah, we're going through and processing stuff in this lifetime, but there's stuff that is so ingrained in them from how the parents were, how the parents were treated from their grandparents, and so forth, so on and so forth down that. And
Yes.
like with that sort of stuff, that's where to tap into that and be able to release that is like, that's where we need to start working through a lot more of embodiment practices to actually start connecting into our body, to start shifting that up and releasing that. And like as somatic therapy, as different releases, like there's so many different avenues you can do it, but for me, like what I kind of focus on is teaching people how to just slowly start reconnecting back and feel in their body, allowing them to be present in their body and allowing them to find safety and comfort within their body. Because again, a lot of times like we don't feel safe, we don't feel comfort in our body because like we've got so many stuff that's holding us back, where we just feel scared, where we don't feel that. So that's where like you marry in that aspects of the masculine and feminine dynamics, is like where the masculine energy is like they want to feel safe, they want to like be secured and have all of this like physical practice, be strong within it. But whereas the feminine dynamic, they just want to feel safe, feel held, feel loved, feel supported within that. So if you are a man that's just stuck in your head but you're not in your body, is like your feminine is not going to feel safe. You're not going to be able to feel vulnerable. You're not going to be able to express your emotion. You're not going to be able to tap into that side of it. So by allowing males to like start dropping into their body, that's allowing them to start evoke a lot more of that feminine energy within themselves, which is super healing in itself. And that has that crossover with allowing them to let down a lot of the barriers within themselves to uncover what needs to be uncovered.
Wow.